All right, and we back on the forecast. So recently, all of those what about black on black crime people have been coming out, and all of a sudden they're so concerned because of what's been happening in Chicago. Recently, over a couple of days, 66 people were shot, 12 people were killed, and RIP to all of those people who lost their lives. But now all of a sudden, all those what about black on black crime, Blue Lives Matter people who love to justify our blood being shed by saying, well, you should have just complied like good niggas. All of a sudden, they care so much about black people being killed.
Chicago just recorded its deadliest weekend of the year with 66 shot and 12 killed in just a 63-hour period, including a boy riding his bike and a 14-year-old and two 17-year-old girls just standing on the sidewalk.
We have a heavy heart. Our souls are burdened. What happened this weekend did not happen in every neighborhood in Chicago, but it is unacceptable to happen in any neighborhood of Chicago.
Well, so far this year, 1,785 have been shot in Chicago and 318 killed. Now, believe it or not, shootings are actually down 30% from 2017, and murders are down 25%, but still those figures are well above what Chicago experienced earlier in the decade. In 2011, when Democratic Mayor Rahm Emanuel was elected, there were 436 murders in Chicago. By 2016, that number had ballooned to 771, a 77% increase. And while 2017 was down from that high water mark, it still saw a devastating 650 slayings. Now, as you might imagine, there's enormous political pressure now on Emanuel to offer solutions to this heartbreaking cycle. It's about time. With that election just months away, he responded today sounding more like Tom Sowell than an Obama liberal.
You can talk about the weather, but the weather didn't pull the trigger. And you can talk about jobs, and they count. But in parts of the city where there aren't jobs, people did not pull a trigger. There are too many guns on the street, too many people with criminal records on the street, and there is a shortage of values about what is right, what is wrong, what is acceptable, what is condoned, and what is condemned.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but on that, he's right. Of course, policing and economic opportunity matter. They matter quite a bit. But are those the factors that are definitive? Of course not. In 2017, the victims of homicide in Chicago were 76% African American, and a disproportionate number of the assailants arrested were also black, primarily male. So what's the cause? Well, if you ask a leftist or the intellectuals who dominate our universities, they'll blame crime on institutional racism or maybe poverty. But as economist Tom Sowell wrote just a few years ago after the Ferguson riots, you cannot take any people of any color and exempt them from the requirements of civilization without ruinous consequences to them and to society at large. Murder rates among black males were going down, repeat down, during much of the much lamented 1950s, while it went up after the much celebrated 1960s, reaching levels more than double what they had been before. Most black children were raised in two-parent families prior to the 1960s, but today, the great majority of black children are raised in one-parent families. Now, to put it a little bit more specifically, in 1950, 17% of black children lived in single-parent households. At that point, black labor participation rate exceeded that of whites. But today, 70% of black children live in one-parent households, and that number is pretty much reversed. Now, moms do their best, of course, and they're heroic. But especially in dangerous areas, boys without fathers or male role models often get hooked in with really bad people. Remember this video from Baltimore, a mother urging her child very aggressively during the Freddie Gray riots. That's actually a mother's love. I mean, maybe she used some 4-letter words, but she could have saved his life that day.
Now, first of all, yeah, we should be upset anytime our blood is spilled, no matter who spills it. And with us, it goes back to that mentality we got through slavery, where it was okay for us to harm each other. We couldn't even look a white woman in the eye, but it was okay for us to harm and hurt each other. They used to make black people whip each other, and most times somebody who you cared about. It was psychological warfare that still affects us today. Now we fight with each other for resources when none of us are in control of the resources. We're still scared to look at the people who have the resources in their eyes. And two black men fight and kill each other over a block that a white man owns. And anytime he wants, send a cop over there to get both of you off the block. And the problems we've been having with the broken homes is as old as the projects. There was a point where we had successful communities. Because of segregation, we were forced to support each other and become millionaires because of it. White people didn't want our money, so we had to spend it with each other. And we all know about how many of those cities were burnt to the ground and destroyed. And even through all of that, even though we don't like to believe us as a people can't have unity, we still had unity. And of course, a lot of people like to blame the violence that we commit on each other on our broken homes. And it definitely does play a huge role in it. And even though there was still mass incarceration, there was still Jim Crow, white supremacy was still strong. Up until the 1950s, our homes was still intact. But you know what happened in the 1950s? The civil rights movement started to gain traction, especially after what happened in Emmett Till. And the United States government went to just about every major black city and the most successful economic parts and destroyed the city and built highways right through. Whatever they didn't burn down, they built highways through them. And then after they destroyed their businesses and homes, and they had their all-white labor unions, and they proudly practiced discrimination, so black people weren't getting jobs. And to replace their homes, they built the projects. The projects in America didn't come around until the late 50s, early 60s, around the same time where the rate of our broken homes started to go up. And after they destroyed their businesses, their homes, everything they had again, the government said, you know what, black women, we'll give you a place to stay. We'll give you food. We'll even let you take your baby to the doctor. But all you have to do is kick your man out of the house. Now, as black men and black women, we like to place the blame on each other and say whose fault the broken homes is. And in reality, as black men, we have some responsibility and black women have responsibility. But overall, neither one of us had the power to make that decision. And it's easy for us to judge now. And when you have no money, no job, no place to stay, I can understand the decision they had to make. And it's easy for us to judge today. But decades later, after all of the feminism, after the President Lyndon B. Johnson and his racism, and Ronald Reagan and his racism, after decades, we got ourselves stuck in a vicious cycle. But even if you ignore the history of the projects and you ignore the root of the problem, what's happening in Chicago still doesn't justify racially profiling every black person in America. I've never even been to Chicago, but you justify racially profiling me in 4 or 5 states away from Chicago because of what happened on a few blocks in Chicago. And it is curious that it's so many shootings for them to only have 1 or 2 arrests. And by the way, if they haven't arrested anybody or even have a suspect, they can't say black on black crime because you have to know who the victim is and the suspect is for it to be black on black. And I don't know if it's outsiders coming in or not, or the police and the government have something to do with it. And by the way, the black police superintendent in Chicago, Eddie Johnson, has done his share of caping for the police in Blue Lives Matter and What About Black on Black Crime. And they love to talk about the crime rate, but then they'll bring a bait truck full of Nikes into an area that is poverty-stricken. That's entrapment, hoping they can catch somebody and arrest them. But you only see that in the black neighborhoods.
I'm with that type of shit, you know that? Yeah. They send people up with this truck right here. They park in this truck on your block with shoes.
Hey, that's sad, man. Y'all can't put no cases on us and y'all are business. Y'all dirty, man. Y'all dirty, man. Y'all dirty, man. Y'all see kids playing ball, y'all park a fucking Nike truck.
Hey,
full of
you see
Nikes in the ghetto.
they parked the Nike truck right here on 67. It's like a bait truck. Y'all
Really?
stay here.
For those people, man, that's a
That's
setup.
right.
It's a bait truck, man.
Bait
Kids
truck.
playing ball.
They come
Y'all
and get
park
you.
an empty Nike truck with Nike boxes in the ghetto. In the ghetto. I don't give a fuck. You would have did it in your neighborhood. No, what the? You did it in your neighborhood. But the black people laugh when you do it in their neighborhood.
They go out of their way to try to prove these statistics right. And even then, they have to skew the stats. They love talking about how black people commit over 50% of the murders. But the FBI, where they get that stat from, will tell you themselves up to 17% of the murders go unaccounted for. Meaning all of the cases where they don't have a suspect and it's still unsolved can't be classified as black on black crime because they don't know the race of the person who committed the crime. Also, they never really answer the methodology they use of how they get these statistics. Does it go by suspected of committing murder? Does it go by arrested? Does it go by convicted? Because if it goes by conviction, we know George Zimmerman shot and killed Trayvon Martin. We know that guy Michael Draker in the Stand Your Ground case shot and killed Marquise McLaughlin, but they weren't convicted. So does that count towards the crime rate? What about when police kill somebody? Does that count towards the crime rate? So this talking point they're trying to push to justify racially profiling and killing us and harming us is still not even true. And then all of a sudden the people who call you racist for saying a black person shouldn't have got killed and call you racist for saying Black Lives Matter, now they care so much about black lives. But in cases like with Armando Frank, who was a mentally ill veteran that was choked to death by Louisiana police and the Avoyelles Parish Police Department.
Do you mind if I talk to you real quick? First of all, you got an ID so I know who I'm talking to? I can't take your word for it. I got to make sure. All right, appreciate it, man. I understand you're a veteran. Both of us are, too. You mind coming on down and talk to us over here real quick?
Oh, well, please.
I need to talk to you over here real quick.
What you need?
Need you to get off the tractor, sir. You're coming off the tractor, Mr. Frank.
Get off the tractor. Get off the tractor.
Mr. Frank, I have a warrant for your arrest.
What?
I don't know what the warrant's for, but I do have a warrant for your arrest.
What we got one?
It's at the sheriff's office. We can discuss it when we get there.
Let's go in.
We are going to see it. You're coming with me to see it.
I'm not leaving the tractor.
Get off the tractor, sir.
Okay. Who sent the warrant?
I'm sorry?
Who sent the warrant?
I don't know who signed the warrant.
Then why would you have a warrant for me?
It's at the office. We can take a look at it when we get there. I'm not the one who got the warrant made.
Now what warrant would you have?
Mr. Frank, the warrant's at the office. We'll see it when we get there.
What warrant would you have? Show me one.
It's at the office. I'll show it
Show
to you
me
when we
one.
get there. Don't have it with me.
No, you can't arrest me.
Yes, sir, I can.
No, you need to show me a warrant.
Get off the tractor.
Show me a warrant.
Step off the tractor. Sir. Okay. Step off of the tractor, I'm gonna take you. Get off the tractor. Step off of the tractor. You don't have no warrant. Step off of the tractor. Show me a warrant.
Mr. Frank?
It's confirmed?
Yeah.
No, it ain't.
Get off the tractor, Mr. Frank.
What the fuck you hit me?
Get off of the tractor now.
You don't have no warrant.
Get off the tractor, dude. Get the fuck off.
Come on out, Dispatch. Get up! Goddamn tractor! Taser deployed.
God damn it, get it!
Get off the tractor! Now!
Oh, God damn it!
Two days deployed.
Fuck!
No. What's his location? Follow up on time.
Step off the tractor! Get off the tractor! 10-4, we're still fighting. Get off the tractor, now!
123 1, please clear the line code.
Get off the tractor, Mr. Frank.
You're still in dispatch. What's that location?
Walmart parking lot. 3 uses of taser.
You get a damn warrant for arrest.
Everybody on the side of the building?
10-4. When you come into the parking lot, head straight left down the furthest lane on the side.
Everybody, sir.
Subject isn't actively fighting anymore, but we still can't get him moved.
You on the opposite side of the car service?
10-4. Opposite side of the tire service.
Let me out. Let me out.
Cool, sir. It's not coming out with one on her.
Let me out. I'm back.
Move your right leg. Get your right leg up into the seat.
Wait till we can at least another I got. Let me out.
Let
me out. Let me out. Let me out.
He's there waiting. He's there waiting.
Where the head goes, the body must follow.
Now, out of nowhere, the Marksville police deputies Brandon Spillman, Alexander Daniel, and Kenneth Purnell approached them saying they had a warrant that they didn't have on them, and they didn't know what it was for, and didn't really have any proof that they had any reason to be bothering them. But of course, he was just supposed to believe them and do what they say and be a good nigga, or else you get arrested. So as they try to arrest him, he refuses and stays on his tractor. When one of the cops jumps on the tractor and grabs him by the neck in a chokehold, while the cop Brandon Spillman tries to tase him. In the video, you can hear him gagging and gasping for air. You can see he couldn't breathe. Then, as they handcuff him and drag his unconscious body back to the police car, one of the cops said, "He's dead weight." And the other cop responded, "Where the head goes, the body follows," as they dragged his limp body back to their car. But he was limp and it was dead weight because they had already killed him. This brother has been diagnosed with schizophrenia for 5 years and is in the police records. The Veterans Affairs records say he suffered from chronic anxiety and difficulty coping, maybe because he was in the service. These cops knew him well enough to spot him while they were doing something else. They knew he was a vet. They knew he had a warrant, even though they didn't know what the warrant was for or who signed for it. They knew everything about him, but they didn't know his medical history. Especially when the police are supposed to know about mental health. But they still choked out a mentally ill veteran. And the DA and the grand jury still decided not to press charges on these cops.
This newly released body camera video, which shows officers struggling with a Louisiana man, is now at the center of a civil wrongful death suit. 44-year-old Armando Frank died shortly after the encounter.
It was comply or die that day, and he died.
It happened last October in Marksville, Louisiana, part of Avoyelles Parish.
You mind coming on down and talk to us over here real quick?
In the video provided to NBC News by the Frank family attorney, officers confront Frank, who's sitting on a tractor, saying there's an outstanding warrant for his arrest. But Frank resists.
No, you need to show me a warrant.
It's at the office. I'll show it to you when we get there. Don't have it with me.
No, you can't arrest me.
Eventually, an officer uses his taser, later saying he feared Frank would flee, and a deputy mounts the tractor and grabs Frank from behind. Attorneys for Frank's family say it was a chokehold, but the deputy says he never applied any pressure to the throat. Later, Frank is pulled off the tractor and dragged to the squad car. Authorities say he died at the hospital. According to the autopsy, Frank primarily died as a result of respiratory and possibly some vascular compromise due to a struggle with police. Cardiovascular disease and obesity contributed to his death. In March, a grand jury declined to indict the officers.
Police officers have what's called qualified immunity to do things that other citizens cannot do. And one of those things is use physical force to effectuate an arrest.
Now Frank's family is suing the officers, the sheriff, and the city of Marksville.
They're supposed to use reasonable force. And if the force that you use kills somebody, it's excessive.
Tonight, the officers in their departments had no comment.
Now, the police said he grabbed him by the neck, but he didn't squeeze. But it was ruled a homicide by manual strangulation. He restricted his breath for 6 minutes while he was being tased, but he wasn't squeezing or applying pressure. And they still justified choking out this mentally ill veteran, even though Kaepernick is the one who disrespects the troops. One criminal justice professor at Bowling Green University, Philip Stinson, said cops are entitled to use as much force as they want. But in cases like this, the outrage is not there. That's why we have to be careful with getting baited into this what about black on black crime narrative. They'll do anything to take the focus off of them. You bring up systematic oppression over hundreds of years, and they say, oh, well, what about black on black crime? You bring up brothers like Armando Frank, and they say, well, look at the violence in Chicago. But what does this mentally ill veteran have to do with Chicago? It's just a talking point, and one they get from misleading rhetoric and biased and skewed statistics. But we as a group, instead of hurting and harming each other, we need to be protecting each other. And I do believe we're more on the same page than they would like us to believe or they would show us. And we can all agree we want to protect ourselves and our children and give them the best opportunities for the future as possible. But until we can learn how to put aside our tribalism, and until we can learn to respond with more urgency than they do to maintain their position, then the cycle will continue probably for another couple hundred years.
I'm in La Mesa right now. You see this officer right now? Right now, he does not have his lights on. You cannot touch me. You cannot touch me. Sit down. Sir, can you call the police, sir? You cannot touch me. You cannot touch me. You see this? You cannot touch me. You cannot touch me. You cannot touch me. You see that?
Sheriff's Department, can you call the police, please?
Robert Branch says he was angry and afraid last Tuesday. It all started as he was getting on the 8th freeway from 2nd in El Cajon on his way to work as a security guard. As he passed the blue Ford Fusion in front of him, he says the driver tried to force him off the road.
In the dirt, we side by side now. We're literally side by side, so I start picking up speed, just to get back on the freeway.
Branch took off, says he didn't see the blue car again until he got off at College and pulled onto a side street.
He parks behind me, gets out his vehicle.
Branch says he was suspicious, so he turned on his cell phone.
Look at right now. Okay. I'm in La Mesa right now. You see this officer right now?
The situation escalated.
You cannot touch me.
Quickly. Branch says he passed out, and when he came to...
So I start defending myself, pushing, and I'm saying some words, and because I'm outraged, I'm mad, because you shouldn't do that.
Branch was jailed and charged with resisting arrest, obstructing justice, and reckless driving.
The case first.
His attorney told me he believes the deputy, identified as Paul Ward of the Child Abuse Squad, did almost everything wrong.
He didn't make the effort to notify backup or call for a uniformed officer for what would have been nothing more than even an alleged misdemeanor on the road. And you've got him resorting to extreme physical violence to hurt Mr. Branch.
I feel like he might do this again to somebody else. After that, I don't believe he should be on the streets for that. I feel like he should get time for that.
One of the big questions here will be about the type of hold that the deputy had on Branch. His attorney calls it a choke hold, which is banned by local law enforcement. A sheriff's department spokeswoman tells me the hold that you saw on this video is a less lethal carotid restraint. Now, the difference is the carotid restraint is toward the back of your neck, away from your windpipe. The district attorney is now reviewing the case to see if any criminal charges are warranted.
Hey, boss man. When I get home today, I'm gonna pray for you, man. I'm gonna pray for you, brother.
Hey, pray for that ugly ass car you drive.
I'm gonna pray for you, boss.
Pray for that ugly ass car you drive.
I got 5 cars. This is just one of them. But I'm gonna pray for you, boss man.
Developing tonight, the investigation into racist flyers with candy left outside homes.
Right now, police are trying to figure out who is behind this. News 6's Lauren Korn is in Port Orange, where homeowners are not happy with the disturbing message.
The woman tells me she found another flyer this morning targeting a different group of people, but still that same message of hate. Meanwhile, Port Orange police say they'll be canvassing this area to find out exactly who is responsible.
Nobody in my neighborhood wanted this.
But these flyers littered Port Orange streets, including Sugar House Boulevard, where Jane Shortino lives.
I was walking the dogs and I picked up a baggie with some candy in it and a flyer.
A flyer that's promoting propaganda for the KKK.
This is just bull.
Shortino posted the flyer to Facebook and alerted Port Orange police.
They want to walk around the neighborhood, see what else is here.
But that flyer isn't the only one Shortino found.
Stop AIDS, support gay bashing on it.
She picked up another one along her walk this morning.
This one upset me as much, if not more, because I'm part of the LGBT community and I have many family members that are also.
We called the number listed.
Greetings from the loyal white knights of the Ku Klux Klan.
And left a message.
Why is this still happening?
Shortino says she too has a message for the person or people who's spreading the hate.
This is a great area to live, and we're not a hateful community, and we don't want this in our front yard. We don't want this in our backyard. There's no hate here.
All right, then do not follow me around. Do not harass a customer. All right? Do not harass a paying customer who has not done anything to you.
I'm sorry, but you can't photograph. No,
I just did it. I just did it. Then do not follow me around. All right? I am being followed around right now, and I've asked them, what did I do to deserve this behavior? Please tell me. Well, you're the one who told him, aren't you? So what did I do to deserve this behavior? And I'm being confrontational. So if someone was following you around, what would you do?
Keep going about my business.
I'm trying to go about my business. I already got your face guy. So I can't just look at books. No, come on, tell me, what warranted this behavior? So you're just gonna stay here and just follow me around the whole time?
Yeah.
You guys don't feel bad about it or anything? I see, but I'm the problem here because I asked you politely, do not follow me around. And I'm the problem here. I tell you, I feel uncomfortable when storekeepers are following me around and you keep following me around and I'm the guy here who's doing wrong. I came here to buy some books and I'll pay for them and I have money. So why are you following me around? Well, I mean, you could see that I'm actually acting very, very even-tempered right now, considering that I'm being, harassed, discriminated against, profiled. Isn't it very even-tempered I'm acting right now? I mean, a lot of people would blow up right now, wouldn't they? They would, wouldn't they? Well, wouldn't they? So what's your name? If someone asks you your name, you can't tell them your name? So, okay, Facebook, this is the lady. I walked into the store, and apparently, maybe, I don't know, maybe she didn't like what I said, and then she says, oh, follow that guy around. So she tells her coworker to follow me around, and then apparently she's getting upset, and she's saying, I'm confrontational.
Come on over here.
Yeah.
Come on over here.